Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the virtual meeting for the Board of Governors, which is being live streamed for the public. And I certainly welcome those viewing through that mechanism. The first meeting of the day is the Academic Affairs Committee, which is chaired by Governor Mark Gaffney. Governor Gaffney, hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Julie, would you please take the roll?
Absolutely. Governor Gaffney?
Here.
Here. Governor Bizzuto?
Here.
Governor Kelly? Here. Governor Kumar? You're muted, Governor Kumar. I can see you. Great. Governor Stancato? Here. Professor Rush?
Here.
Professor Hoogland?
Here.
Manat Zeddy? Here. And Kamali?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Okay, thank you very much. I did not hear Keith Whitfield, the provost, on the roll, but I hope he's there with us because he has two establishments of certificates and one request for admissions tests to come before us. Are you there, Provost Whitfield?
Of course, Governor Gaffney here with the
Governor Gaffney, could I interrupt just a moment? We do need to approve the minutes of the last.
Oh, thanks. So you should have had a chance to look at the minutes either online or sent to you. These are the minutes of the meeting of May 1, 2020. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded.
I'm sorry, could we have who seconded the motion, please? Thank you so much.
All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, there you go. Thank you. Keith, I think what I'd like to do is take the two establishments of certificates first, and then we'll have a vote to recommend those on to the board, and then we'll come back to the request for suspension of the admissions tests. Okay, no?
Certainly, Governor Gaffney. I don't know which one you have first, but let's maybe take a look at the healthcare ethics graduate certificate.
Fine.
It's being offered out of the College of Liberal Arts, specifically from the Department of Philosophy. This is, I'm going to go ahead and be transparent. You know, one of the challenges that we face right now is that we have been losing enrollment in our graduate programs. And I think what you're going to see from both of these graduate certificates is that this is an effort to be able to tap into a market that we believe that there are needs in terms of graduates for. And as you read those materials, I believe, maybe they didn't, we use something called, it's either broken glass or burning glass, I never remember the name, to look at areas in which there might be opportunities for graduates, particularly at the master's level, and this is one of them in healthcare ethics. We were starting off this meeting talking about the coronavirus, and if you could think of no better time to make sure that we have good ethics in terms of public health policy, now is probably the time, and if that's what this graduate certificate would focus on, it would be online, and so it's hoping that we would not only get people from our traditional geographic area, but also it might be even wider than that. So open for questions on that first certificate.
16 credit hours, 4 out of 6 courses are required.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments? All right. Sounds like that one's going to be approved. How about the nonprofit management?
Yes, so the second graduate certificate is another one coming out of the College of Liberal Arts out of the Department of Political Science. And what this graduate certificate is to prepare people to be able to work primarily in the nonprofit sector, but there's other opportunities as well. One of the things that we're seeing, and I'll tie it back to the coronavirus, is that not only with the virus, but also I think with the issues around social justice, that private entities, nonprofit entities, are really wanting to be a part of changing and impacting social justice. And so this is another extremely timely graduate certificate, another one where there is definitely need and opportunity for us to be able to train more students at the master's level. I think that they provided a very thorough review of exactly how this program would go. This would be another one that would be online, so again, would be able to extend our reach. Are there questions?
I have a question. It says that this program, as well as the other program, are self-funded, and I was curious as to the cost of the program for each of them, actually.
So the cost of the programs will vary ever so slightly, but it is our traditional tuition that we charge at the graduate level. And for the first one, I think it's 16 hours, and for the second one, I forgot what the total number of hours are. But Governor Thompson, you're raising an interesting point, and this is one of the challenges to master's education, period, which is that it's typically not subsidized. One of the things that we've had in an institution is for some of our graduate programs, it used to be that there was a lot of corporate support, so students wouldn't have to carry that complete financial load themselves. There's less of that goes on, but there's still value in master's degrees because they do provide excellent opportunities within companies that they work for advancement. So that's I think the tension that exists is that, yes, there is a cost to it that is not subsidized in the same sorts of ways that we do for many other programs, but that there is a benefit on the other end. Now, I will say that there was a article, I can't think of where it was talking about our School of Business, and that for many of the master's students in the MBA program, there would be some financial support for them, but that came from private philanthropy, really wanting to try to help the business school. And I will tell you that the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences actually does work to try to develop philanthropy that might support master's degrees, but that's typically not one, that's what you take on yourself. PhDs are subsidized to some degree through assistantships. Undergraduate is financial aid. Master's degrees is that middle piece of it. And it's one of the reasons why if you don't have master's degrees in areas where people really think that they can get a job and they can make advancement, they won't take on that financial responsibility. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it provides a lot more information, which is very helpful. So then are you at all concerned because of the self-funding piece that may deter, people from taking this certificate? I mean, is the cost so burdensome? Because I still don't have an idea of what the cost is. Is it like $16,000 or $5,000 or something like that?
I apologize for not knowing our exact dollar amount relative to graduate tuition, but it's probably somewhere about $400 to $500. So if you take that and then multiply that times the number of credit hours, you get the cost, at least for the program. You are raising a good point, Governor Thompson. This is one of the struggles with master's programs, is that because they tend nationally not to be funded by anybody, it's what an individual takes on. So they take a particular risk, and it's the reason why we want to focus on ones where they're growth areas where people will actually really be able to get a job and it be worth investing, whether they have to get a loan or whether they have to try to self-fund it. It's also why sometimes master's degrees take a little bit longer as well. And I think we've tried to make it so that the program is offered in such a way that, hopefully it would take you only like a year and a half for 12, 16 credits if you're really going almost full time, or that you can stretch it 2 or 3 years, but you could still get through the program and still get the benefit of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
well, really a comment, particularly having spent almost the last 20 years of my life in the nonprofit arena. This certificate is marketed as something that can be separate from a master's degree. I do think that not just companies, but I think about nonprofit professionals who are already in that role. I do think that their organizations with funded. They get funded to go to Harvard, to business, to take certificates of business. If it's positioned as a certificate by itself, there is the possibility, from my perspective, that there will be the ability for some organizations to fund it and even for some businesses to fund it.
Actually, thank you for that clarification. These are graduate certificates too, and not masters. Full masters.
Right.
Full masters is somewhere between 32 and 36 credits hours, and they have a thesis to it. These are certificates, which again may be that additional credentialing. What you're seeing in the workforce is that people want to see those additional credentials because people are coming from different undergraduate degrees, but they need additional specialization. So I think this is kind of to Governor Thompson's point of that, is there value in this? The value in it, I think, is what Governor Staccato is saying, is that it's in an area where you need expertise, but two, it's not even costing as much as a master's degree. So we do have a lot of hope that this will be something that will be very attractive and very useful for our students.
And we'll be able to track that in a couple of years. We'll be able to say how many students actually signed up for what looks like only the certificate, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And one of the other things that needs to go along with these is proper advertising, because master's degrees, are and certificates, they're just a different beast, and you want to make sure that people actually know that they exist, because again, it's for people who are typically working adults, not only, but typically working adults, and you want to make sure that this gets in front of them as an opportunity to be able to advance.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I've got a question.
Yep. Please.
So, Keith, why would we not seek Title IV funding, and what is involved in getting Title IV funding so that students don't have to self-fund?
That does not cover master's degrees. And so one of the things, actually, you bring up something that I think we do that's pretty cool. We have something called the A-grade program. An A-grade program is where we take and try to kind of mush together an undergraduate and graduate degree. And what you do in some ways is that because you curricularly overlap the two, you make sure that students, even as early as their junior year, are starting to take some graduate level courses. It makes a shorter timeline. And actually, because some of them, I have to be very careful because I don't want this truly said publicly, but it's almost like a class might count for both that undergraduate degree and then be a credit that can be transferred into a master's degree. So then what you do is you get your undergraduate course covered by Title IV funding, but then you can use it to transfer and be something that is credited towards a master's degree. So it shortens time, it lessens cost, and allows students to be able to get a master's degree. Usually, if you stay on track really closely, you can do it in 5 years and have an undergraduate and a master's degree.
But this particular, this is a certificate. Am I right? Not a master's degree, you said.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so do we allow Title IV funding for certificates?
No.
Okay. So because it says the program is not seeking Title IV federal funding for aid eligibility, which makes me think that it's possible, but we're just not doing it, right? Because that's not the intent of what that language says, right?
Yeah. No.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. You're identifying a space that is a very difficult space. In this country, we need people to have that additional credentialing, and there's not the financial support yet for it. It's unfortunate. It is an investment that students have to make. And it's one of the reasons why, as you see from looking at the curriculum that's presented here, they've thought very, very carefully about how students can make sure that they can try to get through in a reasonable amount of time so that they're not stretching out that cost before they actually see their benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I have just one final question. I wasn't able to hit my mute. quick enough. But the Knowledge on Demand program that you referenced in the for the healthcare ethics certificate, what is that Knowledge on Demand program?
Knowledge on Demand is a platform that I can say has been extremely needed relative to our change to remote learning and doing more things online. And so that platform represents kind of a collection of, we had some master's programs online, we had some certificate programs online. They were distributed across, you had to be very skillful at being able to find them. What we've done is just pull them together, and so that's the Knowledge on Demand. The Knowledge on Demand platform also offers our instructors some basic things that our Office for Teaching and Learning has been doing an outstanding job at helping our instructors move to an online format. And so what we did was to make sure that there's one place where you can find all of that. So we said, well, let's put our master's programs, our certificate programs, that are all our online offerings there. Currently, if you look, there's something called Online at Wayne. And to be generous, it looks like a text-based version from the 80s. It's just a kind of a bunch of lists of classes, and you don't get a clear understanding of what online offerings that we have. And so we wanted to make sure that we had one place for that. So the Office for Computing, our CNIT group have created this platform where we can just make sure we put that there. And I think around July 1st, we're going to make a little bit of a splash to just say, if you're looking for online stuff, it's not a marketing ploy. It's marketing to say, we're going to make it easy for you to navigate and to find the kind of opportunities that you might be interested in. So that's what that is.
Great, thank you. That was going to be my next question, whether people know about it, but that's great that it's going to be marketed soon. So thank you.
For this space, I think as you and Governor O'Brien were both noting, because there's a cost to it, because it's in this space where it's not funded by Title IV funding, it's not an undergraduate degree, and it's not a PhD, it's in this master's and graduate certificate. We want to make sure that we make it very, very visible that these are some great opportunities that you can take online as a working adult. They're asynchronous, so you can, take the courses as you have time, but we believe that people have had a hard time finding it on our website before, and so that's the real push for having one kind of a one-stop shop.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any objection then to forwarding these two actions, establishment of graduate certificate in nonprofit management and establishment of a certificate in public health care ethics? What we would do in this committee is just forward it to the full board at 3 o'clock for their approval. Everybody in agreement with that? We don't do this in a formal vote, do we, Julie?
Yes, we do. The academic committee has to approve these two.
Oh, well then let's take a vote to approve the two certificates. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
I'm sorry, could I get the maker of the motion, please?
Professor Roth.
Thank you. And Governor Guido seconded. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There you go. All right. Mr. Provost, on to the question of extending suspension of admission test requirements, please.
Yes, if you may remember that this was brought up by the board to think about taking a look at the, I have the right one up here. To look at how we actually admit students, that with the pandemic, ACT and SAT was actually not doing their testing because they can't do that physical testing in a place. And what this action that we're asking for comes on about a week ago. ACT and SAT actually came out and suggested that schools consider doing test optional sorts of admission requirements because they were not sure whether they were going to be able to offer the testing in the fall. And those are the times when we would be recruiting for the fall of 2021. So what we are recommending is to just extend that suspension a little bit farther. I do want to note that Student Success Enrollment Management, the Academic Senate, have been taking a look at our data to see the success rate of students relative to SAT scores and trying to really dig in and get a better understanding of how predictable those are, so that in the future we may want to keep some sort of alternate testing, or we may want to modify how we use that ACT and SAT, those tests. So this is simply asking to extend it to do the admissions for the fall 2021 admission cycle.
When will that internal review or study be done?
They're doing a pretty deep dive, and they're doing it over the summertime. I'm hoping, and I know that actually Brad Roth is working on that committee, and there may be some others on the line that are participating in that. I'm hoping by the end of the summer we might have enough information. We're going back and going over student success data from years past and trying to get a good picture of just how successful our students are relative to what the ACT and SAT may be, and for other programs like the APEX program where we do a modified sort of admission to see how successful that program is. It's a lot of work, but I'm hopeful that they'll finish by the end of the summer.
Good. And then that'll help us guide to an eventual decision, because I think there's still some concern on the board that we not use them at all, and we do want to make that decision based on review and study, and so I appreciate Professor Roth and others going through that. Questions or comments on the issue of extending the suspension? So that would, may I add the word indefinite to it?
No.
Is it an indefinite suspension?
We're just recommending for the fall of 2021. So,
right.
And perhaps in the fall of 2020, we'll have some of the recommendations that will come from this group from the Senate and that's working with student success and with institutional research, and that they can provide you all with some, as you were mentioning, a data-driven decision on how we might go forward.
Okay, so the vote would be, the question is, and the vote would be continuing temporary suspension through the fall of 2021. Questions or comments?
Marilyn.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, okay, this is Marilyn. Can you tell us at this point how many additional staff you're going to need in order to consider applications without the use of these test scores?
No, I don't know that exact number. But what will help us is to know that we need to do it ahead of time. One of the things that happened over the summertime is that basically you all provided us with that decision, 2 or 3 months before we typically do our admission, not even 2 or 3 months really, weeks before we do our admissions. Now we'll have months to be able to appropriately do it. And, the other thing is that this is only for a certain portion of students. Some have already taken the ACT, SAT. Some of them take it early. Some of them take it a little bit later. We're even hoping that there'll be opportunities between now and December for students to be able to actually sit. There's also some encouragement that there may be some alternative ways that ACT and SAT may do it, but they can't guarantee it, and that's why they're encouraging schools to actually consider this. I did just get a text that it looks like they would need about 6 to 8 additional staff to be able to make sure that they can process all the applications. We get about 20,000 applications, and so, but a lot of those, don't end up following through, but that's what we start with, and so there would need to be about 6 to 8 additional staff to be able to do this action.
6 to 8 additional full-time staff on just for a temporary period. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Is that how it works?
Yes. Because we would hope that for the fall, when we start doing admissions in the fall of 2021, which would be for the fall of 2022, that we would either, decide maybe permanently, those people may be permanent if you all make a decision to really take this on as a part of what our admissions requirements actually are, or hopefully we would be able to recover. SAT and ACT would be able to go back to their norm in terms of when they offer testing possibilities.
Thank you.
Governor Benito has a hand up.
Michael?
Yeah, Mark. First, I'm in favor of this proposal. But my question is that, is it going to put us in any danger with any accrediting agencies or any ranking agencies is my question. And I would also make a request that we don't penalize anybody who takes the test and does poorly. And is there any way we can ensure that? Because I would hate for someone to take the test, be poorly, and get penalized, and then we favor those who don't take the test.
So I'm trying to think of what your question is. I think there was a couple of parts to it. One is that would it put us in any difficulty with our accrediting agency? And that answer is no. We have to have published standards for which we do our admissions, and we'd be fine with that. I think your other question is a little bit more not complicated, but is the idea that if somebody comes in under the ACT, SAT, are they treated any differently than people who are coming in under this test optional? And I would say no. One of the benefits that we have is we have a skilled group. It's not like we've not been doing this. We do have some experience. I think the estimate was 50 to 60 applications this summer, that we have some other experience doing it. We won't know about that until probably August. But that's one of the reasons why I think that committee or that group that we talked about, that's the Senate and Student Success, are really taking a look at it, because they want to make it so that there's an equivalency between what you might get on an ACT or SAT or in this test optional, and then how successful you actually are. And so we'll have a really good view of that. I think I'm hinting that around to the faculty senate, to that group, to say, let's hope we can get it done this summer by August. But it's a lot of data to look through. You kind of want to use almost predictive analytics to say, so if you started off with an ACT, SAT, how likely it is that you'll graduate 4 years or 6 years? What'll be your GPA? How successful will you be? Were there other factors involved? It's going to be a complicated analysis that they're engaged in, but we'll be able to answer that question for you.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't think the hand-raising function is working on this. If I just add some detail to what's going on here. So I've been working with Senior Associate Provost Monica Brockmeyer to try to figure out how to structure our process going forward on this. A couple things need to be done. First of all, that there needs to be a revision of the information that's requested of students, so that we actually have more information to work with, compensating for the potential absence of the test scores. And then we also have to figure out how actually that additional information is going to be evaluated. So that's the short-term project of figuring out how this particular cycle is going to go. And then further, we're going to have to analyze what the longer-term consequences will be, looking ahead to future years, to how this might all be done. With respect to Governor Persuito's point about the people who have taken the test, one thing I think is a significant concern is that we don't want to deter anyone from taking the test, because although the test is optional, the reporting of it isn't apparently optional once you've taken it. And so, we do, for many reasons, want people, if they can, to take the ACT or SAT. It's helpful with respect to other placement issues once they're admitted. It's helpful with respect to honors college issues and so on. And also it will expedite the process. If people did well on the SAT or ACT, then we don't have to look a whole lot farther. But on the other hand, we want to assure people, I think, that if they bombed out on this, that not to worry, because they're not going to be treated any differently than they would have been treated if they'd never taken it in the first place. So I do think that that's a significant consideration.
Thank
That
you.
is my
Thanks
question.
for adding that.
Thank you.
Laura Thompson has her hand up, and so does Governor O'Brien.
Okay, go ahead. Sandy?
Yep. I think Dana was first. She can go ahead.
Okay.
Dana, are you on mute, maybe?
Yeah, I'm on mute, but it was Manette Betty who was the person who had her hand up. I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw DT, and I thought that was you. So.
No.
Hi, I just have one question. How would the absence of the ACT or SAT scores affect any, like, scholarships that incoming students would receive?
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you. We for a lot of our scholarships, they are for our students who are admitted, and sometimes there's a GPA requirement. But I don't think very often we have an ACT, SAT requirement. So we do go on some of these. I'm sorry, I'm a psychologist, and so I like the term, but we call them kind of cognitive factors or even non-cognitive factors, the other things that go on that's not test-based. So those would stay in place. I don't want to say that there's none that are based on the student's ACT, SAT. But we typically, for our scholarships, actually really try to look at more of a holistic person or specialized areas, like if you're a dance major or something like that, and that you've done great dance things. That's what those scholarships have been based on.
I think that's a really good question, too. And Mr. Provost, would you be willing to send us all an email in the next few days and just verify that, tell us that if the ACT and SAT are actually used for any scholarships? Because, of course, we'll need to know that anyway, because if we're not going to use them, you'll have to make those changes.
Exactly.
But that's a very good question.
Exactly. And so one question was about the ACT, SAT, and with scholarships. Was there another one? Julie always keeps track of all of the questions that we do follow-ups on, and I just wanted to make sure that we get all of them that you might have on this particular point. Were there any others?
Does that cover it?
Governor Bryan has some questions.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not sure if this is for Professor Roth or for the provost, but so I agree that obviously I think this is I think we should have extended this the first go round, in which I think we had kind of toyed with and said let's do it 2 years and then do an evaluation and see how it turns out if we want to make it permanent or not. So I'm certainly in favor of it, but I like the idea. So am I correct that this is the process, the procedure of how this is going to happen? Is that going to come back to us, or is it just going to, we're going to give approval now and you're just going to create something?
Well, the approval now would be for that fall 2021 class, and we can schedule when to do it, but I want to make sure that we give that group, as Professor Roth was giving some of the details and some of the challenges, and that too we want to do a little bit of data collection as well, that maybe in December come back and revisit this issue so that we're looking at it with some data both from the past as well as what we might have seen through the summer and the fall, to be able to take another look at it for you all to consider any actions that you might want to take.
So would the process that is upon approval, will the process that gets put in place include something similar to what the professor was talking about? I tried to write down what he said, but it was, if you took the SAT and you didn't do well, it should not count against you, right? Because if you're going to take the SAT and you're going to go to 3 colleges and we don't require the test, but the other ones do, and you put all 3 there to get the results, it's going to come here. It's a bad number. I think we should not be. Our process should not include looking at that number if it's bad. It should be treated just like anybody who didn't take it, right? And I think that's the more fair way to do it. If you're going to do a test optional policy, that it should be test optional for everyone. If you take it because you had to take it to get into another school, but you decide to come here, it should not be used against you. And so I think this would be excellent. I think there's a lot of data that you'll find that shows that we should make this permanent. And I suspect that you'll be working on that the next few months. But for this particular move, I would like an assurance that a bad score is not going to be used against any student, and that a bad score would be thrown out, like you never took the test at all.
I want to answer your question. I want to make sure, Brad, do you have something that relates to that, or do you have something else?
Well, yeah, this reflects the concern that I expressed earlier, that I don't want to see people deterred from taking the exam based on a concern that if they get a bad score, it will end up being used against them. So I think it probably is best from just a strategic standpoint to incentivize people to take their best shot at the exam, and that with the knowledge that it'll get thrown out if it doesn't help them. And then also, of course, there's a question of fairness with respect to people who've taken it versus people who haven't. So I think that those considerations weigh in favor of what Governor O'Brien has said.
There are some, there may be some challenges to doing that, because once you report those scores, they kind of become the official part of your record. We report them to, I think, maybe it was Governor Misconduct was talking about in terms of accreditation. Once those are submitted as part of a student's admissions file, we actually have them on record. We can talk about, and there has to be a very, very specific process, because I think one of the points that was raised in both you all's comments was about fairness and about the idea of submitting scores, but if you didn't do well, you did this other process. And so there's a set of processes that we will set up that will make it so that it'll be as fair as possible. But again, once those scores are submitted, they do become part of the student's record. How we decide to go through with that, with those admissions, if they go through the test optional, then those are not used in that evaluation. But again, what we're giving you is so much detail, and I think we can give that better to you in a full report where you see all of the information, some of the data. But some of this is accreditation, and really, there's process versus the actual data that are going on. When you take that test and you say that you're going to report your scores to Wayne State, they come to Wayne State and they become part of the record. Now, if we have a process that actually does not take those into account, then that wouldn't be a part of that student's admissions process.
Right, because if we have a policy that says the ACT, SAT is test optional, then it does not require us, even if it's part of the student's record, does not require us to take it into account for admissions purposes.
Exactly. And two, remember, for our admissions too, that can just be one part. That for some of the other, not test optional, it's kind of test enhanced or whatever. It's doing it in a 360 manner. That can be one part. So that I'm hoping that group, when they review some of that data, that they'll look at that as well. That you do more of a holistic admission. We do that for a lot of the graduate programs at our school already. That also don't believe that the GRE scores or the LSAT scores should be the single indicator, so it could also be put in that. So there's an optional piece in that too, and I want that group that's working to maybe inform how we look at the students that we get and what information we have, so that we can make the best decision, because that's another option, is to have this more holistic one that really takes in other things and that might include scores as well.
Okay, so let me see if I can sum that up. We're 12 minutes late with the end of our meeting. So the action item would be a recommendation that we extend the suspension of the standardized test score requirements for fall 2021 admission, with the understanding that those test scores, if taken, would not be used for admissions evaluation.
I don't think that's correct.
Okay. Sorry, then. Why would that not be correct?
Because if you have a very high score, you want to use that score.
Say that again, please.
If you have a high score, you'd want to use that score. Some students get really high scores, that helps them get admitted if their GPA isn't quite as good as it should be. So I think what was discussed is that it won't be used against them.
Okay, rather than not used at all,
Right.
it wouldn't be used against the student.
Right.
I wanted to say something if I could on that. It seems to me that the reason, this is Maryland, that we have considered suspending the test score requirement is because some students couldn't take the test because of the pandemic problem. And we wanted not to disadvantage them for coming in with an application lacking the test score. And so it seems to me that we're starting from the point of considering the test score if it's available, but if it's not available, not disadvantaging somebody. And that's what we're talking about for the purpose of this fall enrollment. And it seems to me, based on especially what Keith has said, that when we get to December and we're looking at a possible extension of this policy, we'll have more information and be in a better position to start talking about the underlying concept of whether the score is useful at all or whether we want to use the score not because it's available, but because we think it's unfair. So I think for purposes of this motion, we're not talking about discarding any test score that's there. We're just talking about not disadvantaging somebody who can't give us a test score.
That's correct, and that's what we're recommending.
Okay, so that would be.
Hold up. I have a question, Mr. Chair. So, are you saying then that if a student coming in for next fall has a bad SAT score, is able to take it and does really bad, that will be used against them in terms of admission?
If that's all that we had to consider, yes.
Okay, well then I'm going to vote no. In the decision if it passes. Additionally, I did receive an email, Mr. Chair, from a grad student, regarding the fact that he was aware that we might consider making the test optional for the additional year, and a suggestion was made. He says, I would like to suggest the same be done for the GRE. This test is required by many programs, although the graduate school does not require it. The data on the value of the test is mixed, but the requirement that it must be taken in order to be considered for admission represents a burden for many potential applicants, and I believe has an adverse impact on minorities. The GRE does correlate highly with college grades. Why do we need redundant information? It is a considerable expense to take the test, and disadvantaged students cannot afford to take preparation classes. With many students homeless and or food deprived, can we really expect them to give priority to taking a test? In my experience, many students have no familiarity with the test and what courses they should take to prepare for it. Our graduate enrollment needs all the help it can get. Why not make the GRE optional for all programs for the next 12 months, making it clear that not taking GRE will not be held against the applicant? We can then study the best path forward. I think this would be the right course to follow. And this is from I can share this email with everybody if you want, but I'm assuming he is a graduate student, or potential graduate student. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't know if anybody else got this, but I got it.
Yeah. So let me ask Professor Roth or Provost Whitfield, are you going through the same analysis of the GRE, or is your analysis currently just the ACT and SAT?
The GRE is not on our radar at the moment, and I don't know how we'd even begin to start analyzing that, so I can't speak to that at all.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe what we can do is put that not too far off the shelf, but if your analysis on the ACT and SAT determine that we ought to be making a change, then at that time we could consider the same thing for the GRE. I know that some of our schools rely more on it than others, right, Keith?
Well, and I think as what Sandy was reading from that student is actually correct, that There are individual programs that require it, and they base it on their own judgment about what they see as success with students. That could be a completely separate question that we try to address because the data don't map exactly the same in terms of the predictability of the ACT and the predictability of the GRE, particularly varying by programs. So that would be a very different activity to take on. And if we focus just on this one, it really is just for that suspension for this specific period of time to make sure that we get past the pandemic. And then we can use the data-driven piece. Honestly, it's easier. It's not easy, but it's easier. I know Brad Roth, Dr. Roth would probably cringe when I say the word easy with the analyses that they're trying to undertake. But it's easier because we use it uniformly across the university and not by program.
Right, that's what I thought. Now, let me try one more time, Sandy, to help you out because I tend to agree with you. If someone takes the test, the ACT or the SAT, in a time when consideration of it is suspended for some, those who opt not to take the test, and they don't do as well, and it could harm their admission to Wayne. Keith, I think I heard you say there are other considerations that the admissions office would apply at that time.
Yes.
So can you at least assure us this morning that a test taken and a poor result occurring would at least trigger additional consideration through additional considerations, right? You look at other things. And will we always do that for the next time period till fall 2021?
Definitely to the fall 2021, and that is done in many cases already. That this is one of the things that we started originally was that we do have these other considerations that we make at admissions. It's not solely on that, particularly if a student petitions and says, I don't do well on tests, and we either collect other information. We have the APEX program for one is one that does that test optional. And so that we collect other information so that we can make sure that we're as fair as possible in terms of being able to allow the student admission to the university. We just want to make sure that they have enough preparation so that they can be successful. One of the things that we, I think, desperately want to avoid is bringing a student who might just not yet be ready for a four-year university and that they spend money and they get debt and then not to be able to be successful. As you're going to hear a little bit later on, that's one of our investments in student success is getting those folks who even, who might be very well prepared to less well prepared and making sure that they have all of the things that they need. But there's still another set of students who just may not be ready to be at a four-year institution. And we just don't want to put them in a situation where they pay and that they can't be successful. So it's a very difficult balance, but that's what we try to do. And that's why there are these other routes in terms of being able to be admissions and other things that we consider.
Okay.
I think that's an important point. I mean, we do have a responsibility, to try to avoid presenting a person with the promise of a college education when there's every reason to believe that they're not going to be able to succeed and their money's going to be effectively lost. And I understand, for example, that there are some test scores that come through which are so low that it's almost certain the person couldn't succeed. And to ignore those test scores, it seems to be would be foolish and do a disservice not only to us but to the students.
And let me just add to that, to Governor Kelly, that that's one of the reasons why over the years we've been working with community colleges. Because, and some people go to community college because of cost, but others go sometimes because of preparation. And that we've been making very strong links, Ahmad Ezzedine has been making very strong links so that we provide an opportunity and a pathway for those students who maybe just out of high school just weren't ready, but get really committed. They get a really good foundation in the community college and then can come and be successful at the university. So that's that whole picture. I think you're raising a very good point. Thank you.
Professor Roth's hand has been up. I don't know if that is a holdover from your previous question.
Yeah, that's a holdover from before.
I think
So,
that's,
speaking of questions, can I call the question and see if someone would make the motion to suspend for fall 2021 the standardized test requirements?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Chair, I've got a question. One last question, please.
Yeah, let me try to get a second, then we'll go to discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yes, just in response to Governor Kelly's last statement, let's say you have, a student with a bad SAT. If the reality is if you are test optional, then the test doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's really bad and they bombed it. Because we're purportedly or supposedly using other criteria. So if we're saying we're going test optional, that means we do not use the test to make a definitive decision for admission. Period.
It's not a definitive decision, but it certainly can be part of the decision making.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And perhaps what's between those two is why many schools are thinking about holistic admission, which is that it takes multiple factors into account. So if you're a bad test taker, but you've got a great GPA, you've been very active, you show other things, you then get admitted versus somebody who might only be a bad test taker and there's no other information on them to make that decision. And so that's the kind of information that group is going to be able to provide us to be able to make, if you want to make this more holistic sort of function in terms of admission, to make those kinds of decisions. They're different decision points.
So, but Provost Whitfield, we have been trying to do holistic admissions since I got here in 2013 with a different enrollment manager. I forget her last name, but Corrine something or other. Nice lady. But we've been trying to do holistic admissions and pass holistic admissions, where we say we do holistic admissions. I don't know that we really do. But so, I think what needs to happen is maybe Professor Roth and his group need to come up with, a process sooner than later regarding how this is going to be done. And I just, the whole point of test optional is you can take the test or you don't have to take the test, but it can't be used against you if you do take it and do bad, poorly, So that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Motion and second. Any more discussion? All those in favor then please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. I think that concludes the Academic Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Governor Gaffney. We're about 25 minutes behind schedule, so we'll go straight into the Student Affairs Committee. And the Student Affairs Committee is chaired by Governor Shirley Stancato, so I'll hand it over to her. Governor Stancato.
Thank you, President Wilson. Really, can you please call the roll?
thank you. Governor Stancato? Here. Governor Barnhill?
Here.
Governor Gaffney? Here.
Here.
Governor Kelly? Governor O'Brien? Here. Nita Simon?
Here.
Victoria Dallas?
Here.
Ria Chabra?
Here.
And Denishi Betty?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. I think our first order of business is approval of minutes from January 31st. Hope we've all had an opportunity to review those. Any questions? So I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Support.
Was that Governor? Yes, Governor Gaffney supported.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Guess that makes so. Let it, everybody. Any opposed?
I think many people have mute on, but I think you have it.
No. So today we but today we have an opportunity to really, in my opinion, hear information about really why we're all here around the student success perspective. But if I can just take like just a minute, we haven't talked about it today, and I know President Wilson, you sent out a missing statement about this day, which is June 19th, which is Juneteenth, and I know we're going to probably have submission of it at the board meeting, but I just want to talk about the fact that I can't believe that in 2 or 3 weeks' time, we've moved to the point where many organizations are recognizing Juneteenth in a way that they haven't before. What I can say is some of the folks who, I actually grew up celebrating Juneteenth. My parents, who were older, celebrated it from Louisiana, and I knew about it and learned about it. Juneteenth really is June 19th. It was 2.5 years after 1865, and 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, after the slaves were freed, when finally the news got to Texas, which was the furthest point of slavery, that said slaves are freed. And so 2.5 years later, this is, in many ways, my whole growing up was celebrated in my household and places in the South. And so now we're looking at is a celebration of this for today. So I'm really grateful for that. And just want to make sure I said that, something about that in our community before we go to the full board. And so what I'd like to do then, I don't know if Provost Whitfield has some comments to make before we go to Monica Brockmeyer and her report. One of the things that we have a lot of information, I reviewed it, and if we could do, say, say half of our questions go to the first half and then the second half. What I'm looking at for those of us who have the report, maybe go 1 through page 9, and then page 9 ask all the questions we need, and then after page 9, because we have a lot of things to get through, and I just want to make sure that we get through it. If that's not a problem for anyone, again, write down your questions, and after page 9, all the questions are before page 9, and then after that way we'll make sure that we can get through, because we are about to.
Can I, before we start, can I just ask everyone during the presentation to put your microphones on mute? We're getting a lot of feedback, and the audio is a lot better with everybody on mute.
Thank you. Provost Whitfield, do you have comments before Associate Provost Brockmeyer comes and makes her presentation?
Just to introduce Senior Associate Provost Monica Brockmeyer, who focuses on student success, and let's get to the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be together with you again, and to have a chance to present my annual student success update. Last time I was with you, wait, I have to share the slides. Here we go. There you are. Last time that I was with you in December talking about student success, I showed you this slide talking about my confidence that our university is the university that the world needs, and that by 2030 everyone would see us at our full greatness and appreciate what we can bring to the university that other universities cannot bring. And Governor Barnhill, I just want to mention that I'll leave any comparisons between Harvard University and the Lee State to you and to you alone, so I've modified that slide. But since the last few weeks and last few months of the multiple crises unfolding around us, I'm more convinced that actually 2030 is here now, and what the country needs from us, what our students need from us, and what we have within us is already the vision and the need that we are, we are at that moment now, and we are delivering and beginning to deliver something quite unlike what has been seen and experienced in higher education. But the key part that I always present each year, of course, are the graduation and the retention rates, and to give you an update on those. For those of you who may be newer to this meeting, I want to mention that the government requires that we report these rates on our undergraduate students. So this is a report on undergraduate student success, and that we report these rates on students who start in college as full-time freshmen. And so others of our students, for example, transfer students or students who start part-time, are not included in this data, although they're, of course, very much included in our mission. So we have, of course, seen considerable improvement in our graduation rates and other student success metrics. As of last year, our last formal recorded retention and graduation rates, our 6-year graduation rate was at 48%, up from 26%, our 5-year graduation rate at 44%, and 4-year at 29%. You can see on the bottom, our second retention into the second year has been quite flat, but we have seen tremendous gains, 10 percentage points or more improvements in our retention to the third year and to the fourth year. But that's where we were last year. It's now June, and more students have graduated since that time, and since we're not yet able to share our formal graduation rates for 2020, I can tell you where we are here, where we are so far with our 6, 5, and 4-year graduation rates. And so our 4-year graduation rate is currently at 25.5%. We still have the spring, summer, and more students who will graduate then, and so we can expect to see an improvement in our 4-year graduation rate. Our 5-year graduation rate, we're already ahead of where we were last year and still rising, so we're looking at a leading indicator of great gains in our 5-year graduation rate. What I'm really, really especially happy to share with you, and many of you may have seen the announcement last year, that we have already, as of this semester for the first time, passed our strategic plan goal from the 2021 distinctively Wayne strategic plan. Our 6-year graduation rate is now at 50.5%. It can only go up from here between now and the end of August. And so I think we can stop and congratulate ourselves that we can expect we'll come in maybe 51, 52%, but we have achieved this graduation rate goal that some years ago would have seemed so elusive, and that we achieved it more than a year early. So I want to just stop and thank each and every one of you on the board and the boards before you have supported student success so beautifully, as well as President Wilson, Provost Whitfield, and all my other colleagues within the university. Of course, and this is Juneteenth, and we're looking at the crises unfolding around us, and so we always need to look at the extent to which our student success gains have been experienced by every member of our campus. And in particular, there is a need, of course, to look at our graduation rates and our retention rates for our Black students. So again, what you see here is the trajectory up until the close of 2019, last fall. You see the trend lines are quite parallel for Black students in most cases, with our Black graduation rate tripling from below 8% to 24%, and other gains in our 5 and 4-year graduation rates. You can particularly see that we're really beginning to see a sharp upward change in the slope of the graduation rate for our 4-year graduation rate. Looking ahead, right now, in June, we're at 11.4% and rising. We can expect that number will continue to rise. And I'm just going to verify here. We can see that it may rise as high as the data point I want to mention, as high as 17.3%. Our 5-year graduation rate is at 25%, already way ahead of where we closed at 18% last year. That 5-year graduation rate for Black students may actually go as high as 27.5%. So that would be a considerable uptick. And our 6-year graduation rate is currently at 23.5%. That may go as high as 25%. So I'm going to pause here because those numbers may be a little bit confusing, and in particular, you may be asking me, how can our 5-year graduation rate be better than our 6-year graduation rate? The explanation for that is that those are different cohorts of students. The 6-year graduation rate is for students who entered in 2014, and the 5-year graduation rate for those who entered in 2015. And so the fact that our 5-year graduation rate is higher than our 6-year graduation rate for Black students is evidence of the rate at which we are improving our supports for Black students and the outcomes and the benefits that they receive. That group has already graduated at a faster rate in 5 years, but the previous group took 6 years to accomplish. So again, I thank you, as always, for the support that has enabled us to get to this point. Now, I also want to show just very briefly data on other groups of students who may be of interest. These are scales to allow comparison across each group and the shape of the trends, rather than to be exactly comparable across groups. We can see here, though, that in most cases, very, very similar pathways for Latinx students, white students, and Asian students, with increases in 6, 5, and 4-year graduation rates, with second-year retention rates remaining fairly flat, and upticks in various patterns for many groups for retention into years 3 and 4. So, of course, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions about that, but I really, especially as we focus our student success efforts on the notion of equity, we have to acknowledge that looking at the rates of graduation and other student success outcomes for Black students, Latino students, first-generation students, and others is only part of the story, and that we have to look at our overall impact in terms of the number of students who graduate or otherwise receive the benefits of student success. I also know that, in particular, the number of degrees awarded to Black students over the last many years has been of particular interest to this board. So in this chart, I want to share with you the data on undergraduate degrees awarded to Black students from the years of 2005 through 2019. And you can see there quite a bit of movement up and down in that year to year. And so the question about whether that number is going up or going down really is a factor of what years you start as your baseline. I see a lot of variability there and not a clear trend myself. But I also want to share with you the number of graduates who received undergraduate degrees who characterized themselves as 2 or more races. And that number has continued to increase, not only at Wayne State, but across all of higher ed, as students, the younger generations in particular, increasingly identify themselves in more granular ways. And so we thought to take a look at those students as well. And based on the information we have so far, we can see that the majority of students who are coded in our system as being 2 or more races also identified within our system that they identify at least partly as Black. And so I wanted to share that with you as part of the contributions that and the impacts we are making for Black students in our Black communities. and we're continuing to work to get a more accurate understanding of those students and those outcomes. And
I've been off and have what I said 9, but 10, page 10. So I mentioned who has questions for Social Phyllis Brockmeyer about anything that she's presented between the first page and where we are now. Questions?
I have a question. So I am just curious about the what you were talking about in terms of the 5-year graduation rate for Black students versus the 6-year graduation rate, and the fact that the 5-year graduation rate is better. Mm-hmm. What are some of those tools or programs that have been implemented for that class of 2015 that you think has increased those numbers?
So, can you go back to that on the screen, please?
Yes, I will.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, here we go. Great. Thank you, Governor Thompson. I really appreciate that question, and that question and questions like that are one of the most difficult to grapple with, given that we have already implemented more than 150 or 200 projects or programs devoted to student success. And so we don't have precise ways to say exactly what the supports were or the programs that were the most or singly effective for those students. All of our gains in student success, in my belief, are the accumulation of more than a decade of getting better and better. But I do want to mention a couple of things to put into context. One, of course, would be bringing of Marquita Chambly as our Chief Diversity Officer, and with that, creation of the Office of Multicultural Student Engagement. So, those students joining a year later, they have had those supports, would have had those supports earlier in their academic career, and we certainly know that getting students the supports they need early matters the most. And while the Office of Multicultural Student Engagement is small, it has had a transformative effect not only on the students they serve directly, but I believe on the rest of the university and the ways that we deliver student success. And then I want to also mention that we have had for many years, and we're always getting better at the ways that we can use first data and predictive analytics to deliver more targeted outreach when we see that registration for a group of students say, for example, Black or Latino students falls below what we would expect. We can marshal our forces and do more direct outreach. And we also have had, through our action teams, our learning and our change methodologies over many years, we always have an inclusive excellence action team at the center of that work who gathers findings and makes observations. And so we have learned from that more about the particular junctures, for example, at which Black students may first face difficulty, so that we can, and all of our students may first face difficulty. So I guess the simplest answer is those students have had the benefit of all of that, earlier and through more of their career than they were before.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, so for our student athletes, those who are Black student athletes, can you tell me what the 5-year graduation rate or the 6-year graduation rate are for those students? And are there lessons? It seems like there are lessons that we can learn from, certain programs, for example, with athletics, or the Center for Latino Studies, that provide direct examples of, very robust support for our students of color that it seems like we should be applying, for all of our students, not just students who are in those particular programs, because we know in particular for Black students, that mentoring is important. Having that support early on is important. Why aren't we applying those tools for all of our Black students? I know there's a lot there.
No, thank you. That's a fantastic question. So the first part of it is, do I have the numbers and can I share them? Those numbers have, the ones that I've seen have always been provided by the athletics department. I don't have, at the moment, those numbers available to me that I can present them to you, like exactly with the same format. But I can get that, and I will. With respect to the lessons we can learn from athletics, I do believe that the lessons of support, of having champions, of having support earlier, that we have embedded those practices into our advising, our academic success center, other programs such as Warrior Vision and Impact program. And what I see is the lessons from athletics that are not yet made available to non-athletes would be two. And first one, of course, is that maybe it's only one. I'll just say, I think the most powerful benefit that athletes have that non-athletes don't have is that NCAA eligibility is a powerful motivator. And we can't just simply replicate that for non-athletes. But I really think that it speaks to the importance of delivering support and care that derives from the student's purpose and not just our view of what they should be doing through tutoring, through mentoring, or how they take advantage of those supports. And in fact, my team over the last month has been spending a lot of time looking at ways that we can practically embed deeper care for our students' purpose into student success, because we know that when students know that college will meet their deepest purposes, maybe not our purposes for them, then that is incredibly motivating. They will work harder than ever. They will accept our help in ways that might not happen if they don't have that intensity of purpose. And I think that's a difficult thing. It's not something I think that can be replicated like program by program, but more in the practice of those programs. And I agree we can continue to do work in that way. Is that helpful to you?
I'll add a couple things. I'll add a couple of things on that also. Certainly from the support standpoint, excuse me. Most athletic programs, in terms of the amount of resources they have for the number of students, it far exceeds what is done on a larger scale. So that's one part of it, but it's not the most important. It turns out that student athletes in general, just throughout the country and not just here at Wayne, do better than non-student athletes. Part of it is, as Monica was saying, is that the NCAA has certain entry criteria, and you have to in order to get into an athletic program on a scholarship, you have to meet certain qualifications. But the other part is that there's a strong financial motivator for them to continue to go to school and finish, because they'll lose their athletic scholarship if they fall behind. And so there's a lot to that, but certainly throughout the country, student athletes, Black and white, do better than the general student population, and that's certainly what we see here also.
Yeah, my point was not just about athletics, but also programs like the Center for Latino Studies, programs that have proven to have developed methods to support students of color and help them to graduate at greater levels than students who are not in these programs. And I mean, there may be a different motivation for, student athletes, but I would think that all of the students who are here for a reason. They want to get a degree. They don't want to be, taking classes and graduating or not just leaving school without getting a degree and having debt. I mean, there's a motivation for them to be here in the first place, and they just need extra supports. And we have other programs that are helping to support our students. So why aren't we replicating those aspects of those other programs for our Black students?
Yeah, I think we probably are, and Monica, I think, is going to be talking about one of them in the second half of the presentation, the VIP program, which is certainly been very, very successful. Monica, you were going to say something else? I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to actually say exactly that point, President Wilson and Governor Thompson, that for about 3 years now, more than 3 years, we've had two important groups and programs, and one, of course, is the Warrior VIP Vision and Impact program that has demonstrated that from the first year we were able to eliminate black-white disparities with respect to retention. And also, but there is also the VIP Coalition, in which programs like the Center Latino Latin American Studies, our Rising Scholars program, and other programs that have long supported students of color and other historically excluded populations meet bi-weekly or monthly, in which they share practices, learn from each other, and we learn from them and have used that to improve the Warrior VIP program for students. And also, though, that program, VIP, is not yet at the size that it would need to be to support all the students who could benefit from it. That's the other answer.
So how many students does it benefit, and how many students would it need to benefit?
I think I could pull that data up, but I will approximate it for now, in that right now we have capacity to bring in about 125 to 200 students a year, and I believe it could, we won't know, but I would expect that we could, that upwards of 600, 700, 800 incoming students could benefit from it. Not only Black students, but other students.
So what's the hindrance in ramping it up?
So first, two hindrances. One is that scale is in itself is challenging. So, for example, the Harlem Children's Zone, spent 4 years on one block before they went to 4 blocks and then to 25 blocks. And so the learning that comes with scaling is very, very important. But also, of course, there are resources. And so, in particular, for example, I want to mention that we do have 3 proposals to the federal TRIO SSS program that we may hear from this week or next week, which will provide $750,000, up to $750,000 a year, expand that program.
Okay. And there's a lot of other questions, so I'll yield.
I see Governor Kelly had your hand up.
Marilyn, are you on mute?
Governor Kelly.
Yeah, no, sir. I do want to applaud you for being able to show us the significant increase in graduation and retention rate. I'm always bothered by the realization that even with these rising successes, we are behind many other universities in the state in terms of graduation and retention rate. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. We are not yet where others have gone and where we can go and must go.
Okay. Can you tell us offhand what are the 6-year graduation rates at Eastern?
pull that for you. I have it at hand here.
So, Governor, are you asking for the graduation rate for everybody or for Black students?
No, I was asking for the overall.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I really would love to give you that number right now, but I have so many data points in my back pocket that I can't find it right now. Could I come back to you with that, Governor Kelly?
By all means.
Yes, Governor Kelly, the one thing I was going to mention is that when we set the goal of 50%, we looked at public urban universities, and 50% was at that time was considered to be I don't remember exactly whether which percentile it was in that cohort, but was certainly a very respectable number to try to reach. In other words, public urban universities have traditionally always done not as well as some suburban universities or what's called metropolitan universities, and certainly some of the more smaller towns where the universities are the main activity. They just haven't. The urban universities have traditionally been more challenged, and so 50% is actually pretty good for urban universities. But we'll take a look and see what where we are.
Okay, I appreciate your point, and I know that we're going to. It's troublesome to figure why this has to do and what more we might be able to do. And I know I'm getting a little off topic here, so I won't belabor it. But it is a continuing subject of interest to me, just what we can do to break through that 50% mark and raise our rate to graduation for everybody.
So I don't think you're getting off topic. I mean, I think that's what we're talking about here. Here are our results as a result of some of the programs that we have in place. And Governor Thompson is asking the question, you're asking the question of what more can we do to make these numbers continue in the upward, that where they're going upward. Okay, so I think we really are right on point. I see Governor O'Brien had her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Monica, if you go back to your slide regarding the undergraduate degrees awarded to Black students, the chart.
Hang on 1 second.
I noticed that, so I went back and I looked at our fact book regarding some of the data, and noticed that our 2010 number for African Americans, actually you have it lower than it actually was. It's actually 460, and then our 2012 numbers, you have it lower than it actually was. It's 527. Then, if you're going to include, obviously if a student self-identifies as 2 or more races, they're not designating themselves as one or the other. So, but you're going to group them, for argument's sake, in the Black category. So if that's true, our fact books do not show that we are tracking specifically 2 or more races from 2005 to 2010. So I'm not sure where those numbers came from, but our fact books did not track that specific demographic. So the ones beginning 2011 and onward, and those numbers are a couple of those are incorrect. It should be 21 instead of 25, and 2012 should be 22 instead of 28, and the other ones are correct. But so, and that was just looking at our fact book. This is your data, And I just wanted to make sure that one, where were you getting the numbers prior? Because since our fact books were not tracking specifically 2 or more races. They did have unknown, but we still have unknown. We still track unknown.
Absolutely.
Right?
So,
and I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's completely a good question. So what I can say is that this is the data provided to me by Undergraduate, by our Office of Institutional Research and Analysis. And over the years, there are occasionally changes to reporting, not this data, but for example, sometimes our cohorts are updated because we discover that a student has died, for example. And when a student dies, we remove them from the cohort. And so I am not in a position to really say anything about the accuracy of a fact book from 2005 or 2009. I can't vouch for it. I believe it is the best information that was available at that time, and this is the information that I believe is the best available at this time as provided by institutional research. And I think I'm going to have to defer and ask, if you would like to hear more from Darren Ellis or our Assistant Vice President for Institutional Research about the specific reasons that this data might differ. I'm sure that they would be happy to, provide that discussion afterward.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, except these are your numbers. You're the one presenting them. So
That's right.
Purportedly that,
These are my numbers, and I can speak to that these are the numbers that are the official numbers provided by institutional research. But I cannot speak to the accuracy of fact books from 2005, 2009. Those were created by, on older computers, by people who are no longer part of the university.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
I can,
Ms. Brockmeyer?
Yeah.
I understand that. What I'm saying is, if you're going to include it, then maybe you should put a little caveat to say, hey, here's what this is, because you're purportedly presenting this to us as truth and as fact. And so when we rely on it, we rely on what you give us. I just happen to look at the fact books to check the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so therefore I found a few discrepancies. That's all I'm saying. Is
Absolutely.
that
I concur on the existence of those discrepancies, and this is the official data provided by institutional research for Wayne State University.
So I think that's all right now, Madam Chair.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, then I guess we should.
So I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I did have something else. I just my note.
Okay.
So Ms. Brockmeyer mentioned something about Marquita Chambly's office. I think I'm the only one on the board who's still on the board who created that office, who voted to create that office under President Gilmore. I recall when we hired Roy that we had hired him, and then he attended a meeting with us regarding it was a budget and finance meeting regarding funding the office. And Roy, I don't know if you'll recall, but we had some hesitation to fund this office for 3 years. Do you remember? The old administration was going to create the office that we wanted to create, but they weren't going to give it any money for 3 years. Do you remember that, Roy?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And then we were like, no. And so we funded it. But what I want to say about Marquita's office or Dr. Chambly's office, is that it's a hell of a lot of pressure to put on one person in one person's office to fix all the wrongs regarding race at the university, okay? Especially at a time, we've seen her budget. It's, it is what it is. You all know it's not that, it's not as robust as it should be for the expectations that we expect to come out of that office, right? We expect that office to be at the forefront of, let's put something up when something in the world's going on here. And I think it's if we're going to do that, then during our budget season, we should make sure that we adequately fund what our expectations are from that particular office. That's all I wanted to say about that. I just, a lot is always said as, well, we have this office and, she does this and she does this, that's wonderful. But if Black students are important to us, then we need to start putting our money where our mouth is. And our retention of Black students, any difficulties that they have, Black and brown students. So I think it's important that, and I'm talking to my colleagues specifically now, that during our budget season, and everything is tight right now, but if we're going to, all these corporations right now are kind of, I feel like they're finally recognizing Juneteenth, right? Everybody's recognizing Juneteenth all of a sudden, which is an excellent first step, right? But if your policies for your corporation or your entity don't help move forward a movement, then it's all just show, right? I don't want that to be us. So to my colleagues, I would hope that during our budget season, we adequately put our money where our policies are, and we understand that our policies regarding our minority and underrepresented students are of utmost importance to us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other comments before we move on to the next part of the report? Not? And Monica, you want to move on?
Yes, thank you, I will.
We'll do the same thing here. We'll finish this. Really, I think we'll do the same thing. We'll finish the next part, then we'll have questions.
Thank you. So, in light of the quality of the discussion so far, I do want to speak a little bit about the amazing work and innovation that our university has done as we responded to the coronavirus and what that has said and meant about our work in student success so far and the question of Black students and equity. But I am going to not read every word on the slide and go through it a little bit more rapidly. But I think you really should know a little bit about not just what we did since the crisis in the middle of March, but how we did it and what I have observed about our university. When the faculty pivoted to take instruction to the remote and online environment, the rest of the university also stepped up in ways that are remarkable and transformational. And so, for example, we've been running in rounds, short sprints of work. Our first round was 1 week. And in 1 week, we created 40 continuity plans for advising and other academic support services. We executed those plans. We created professional development and Assist Anywhere website resources for the advisors and others who support our students in light of the crisis. We created a resource kit for students. We created a real-time response in student re-engagement monitoring. And I don't think other universities did this at all, in which we looked at Canvas data as well as asking faculty 70,000 data points. Our faculty gave us with tremendous urgency to tell us which of our students had re-engaged in the new environment and which had not. And as always, our Inclusive Excellence Action Team sat at the center of all that work to keep the equity focus in mind for us. And that was just 1 week, and we followed that with subsequent rounds of effort in rounds 2 and 3, which continued into March and April. We launched our ecosystem monitoring team, in which we now have staff monitoring student social media to understand not just what students are saying, but how they're feeling, and we can then adapt and improve the delivery of our student success resources in this new environment much more rapidly than ever before, even. So, I really want to mention, it really helped you see the ways that in this crisis we are better than ever. And I am a parent, I'm embarrassed to admit, a parent of 2 children at other universities, and other universities and other students did not get the care that all of our campus, faculty, advisors, and others have been able to deliver so responsibly to our students in light of the crisis. We are now in round 4 And round four, just wrapping up round four, and in particular, we are we're doing an assessment of what were the impacts of the coronavirus on our undergraduate students during the winter. Who performed less well than we might have hoped for them, whose progress was delayed, what new and unexpected needs arose for them as well as for our incoming students, and assessing how well did we deliver those services remotely so that we can now build on that and moving forward in July and August in our rounds 5 and 6, continue to deliver new forms of intervention, new support, whether it's, we're suddenly seeing that internet is a basic human right. So our needs of our students that may have not been fully visible before the crisis has surfaced new needs, and we have I'm not talking about my team, but our campus, we have been able to rise to support those needs in ways that I know as a parent other universities have not. And I want to put that in the context really that was made possible because of the investments that all of you have made and your predecessors on the board have made in student success over the past almost a decade. And so I just want to, I'm not going to read through these, you know what they are, some of you were here for these, but I want to just show you how continued support, continued investment, continued innovation in student success is really what drives those numbers up. They don't drive up, out of sheer, momentum, but continued and sustained innovation and investment. In the early 2000s, there was an initiative by people long before us called the 40,000 Initiative. That was an initiative to grow our campus to 40,000 students without a corresponding investment in the resources and the support that students would need to be successful. And you can see the results of that as our graduation rates hit their low of 26%, and you can see that the sustained investments and new programs and support have multiplied, have reinforced each other to drive us to the 50% that we were so happy to share with you yesterday and with the world. And another way that we can see the results of those investments is not only on the change in our graduation rate, but also on the size of our undergraduate population. And we talk so much about our enrollment, not only because, of course, it is our impact that we make on the students who come to us, but also because we know we're a tuition-dependent university, and our enrollment sustains us. And so the relationship between student success and our overall undergraduate enrollment has been a complicated one, and I wanted to just spend a little time so you can see the ways that student success and changes in our graduation and retention rates affect the overall enrollment. And I think the easiest way to imagine this is that our undergraduate population is like a bucket, and it has holes in the bucket. And students come in through every fall, every winter, at the start of the semester. They come in 2 ways, either as new students, which are here in yellow, or as returning continuing students, which are here in the taupe brown color. And they leave the university basically in 2 ways, successfully or unsuccessfully as graduates, or else they leave without a degree. So since the start of the Student Success Initiative, you can see the trajectory in the sizes of our incoming class, the size of the number of continuing students we have, the number of students who are graduating each year. I'm not saying the number, I'm sorry. One number, and the percentage of students who left each year. So across the bottom, you can see that our entering class of both freshmen and transfers continued down for some years after the beginning of the Student Success Initiative, and then has continued upwards until we had the largest full-time freshman class in 2018. So that number has come back up over time, and that number also really contributes to the number of continuing students, because those lean years in the middle of small classes of 2013, 2014 mean that there are fewer students to be retained in the future years of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. No matter how good our student success initiatives are, there are fewer students we can be improving, but there are fewer students who can come back. And then I want to also draw your attention quickly to the top bar, the red bar, where we can see a huge decline in the number of students who leave our university each year without a degree. And some students, of course, may leave for very, very good reasons, but we want that number to drive as low as possible, and we want every student who does leave to leave knowing that they are better for the time that they spent with us. So I'm really proud of that number, and I hope you will be too. Now, the graduation number, the number of students, 34% more undergraduate degrees each year than ever before. I just hope you also will appreciate and imagine the impact that has on our world, on our society, our communities around us. But it also has an impact on our continuing students, because it also means we're graduating students more rapidly, which is great for them, great for us. It's what we should do and must do. But it also means that fewer students to bring back in subsequent years. So that also brings the small brown bars, the brown bars of continuing student decrease. Now, but that number is beginning to increase over the last couple of years, and we know that we are dependent on our enrollment. We want our overall enrollment to grow, and so, but what we are seeing is that number is growing for two reasons. One is that we've had bigger incoming classes, and the yellow bars at the bottom beginning to come back, but also we see those retention increases that I showed you earlier into years 3, years 4. Our overall retention rates there are up 10 and 12%. And so each year, whatever the size of that brown bar is, if we can bring back, that group, 2, 5, 10% better than the year before, you can see that the investments in student success are not just investments in mission, but investments in the size of our undergraduate population and the sustainability of the university. Now, here is where I want to talk a little bit about what's coming next in student success and our future, how we aim to meet the challenges ahead of us, and those are organized around 3 ideas, 3 very, very important ideas, and that is culture, momentum, and equity. But, as we came into this day and listened to the news, saw the president's remarks about Juneteenth, Governor Sancato, your remarks about Juneteenth, the discussion that each of you have raised and the questions you've raised, I feel like the things I wrote on this slide are not totally up to what's needed in this moment and the questions that you've asked. I do want to really emphasize our commitment to narrowing and illuminating our educational disparities, not just the numbers, but the whole student experience. Together with 130 other universities nationally participating in the APLU, powered by Public's initiative, those universities have committed, and we have too, to cutting our educational disparities for underrepresented and historically excluded students in half by 25, and increasing the number of degrees awarded to those students. And President Wilson and our university are the lead of the urban cluster, and that has been a fantastic privilege to be part of that leadership. And also we must commit, as we've discussed before, to eliminating those educational disparities by 2030. But, I still think that saying, oh, we've committed to those goals, here's our initiative, it's not enough to this moment and to the world we see outside of us and the questions that each of you have asked. I'm going to say for myself that up until like this year, I didn't know a lot about Juneteenth. It seemed like something that was kind of quaint, kind of far away, it was in the past. And I think that that's exactly the point that I'm realizing this year, and that we are all realizing this year, that it is about what we see and what we choose not to see. And that despite, emancipation, suffrage, civil rights, not everyone is seen, not everyone is valued. And here we are, having our student success report. It's about my 9th one. We celebrate our progress. We know it's been very real and meaningful progress for our Black students and other groups of students of color. But we're asking the same question. Not quite the same question, because we used to ask, why can't students succeed? And now we ask, what more must we do? How can we fix it? Why can't we fix it? Which is an improvement. And yet I think we stop short. We cast about. We imagine that the answer to how this problem must be addressed is so esoteric that it must be a secret somewhere else, that we can't quite figure it out. It's too hard to ask on. But like, why? Does this question have to remain so intractable for us? And like when we started to have our improvements, we got, we're the fastest improving university in the country. People started to see our great success and say, like, why were we doing so well with respect to the increase in our graduation rates? How could us at Wayne State University, in the center of Detroit, Michigan, where everything had to be harder than everything else, how could we be the fastest improving university in the nation? Why are we able to do what other universities have been unable to do by improving so fast, and yet still unable to close and narrow and close these educational disparities? So I was asked by some leaders, 100 higher education leaders, presidents of universities, to talk about our innovation in student success. And that was pretty hard because we've done so many things, but what I told those leaders was that our innovation was love. And by love, I mean love like our hearts ripped out of our bodies. And I had seen for years, my almost 9 years working in this role, over and over again, love from our campus for our students, like our hearts are ripped out of our bodies for who our students are, who they might be, for ourselves, for our university, and what our university might be. And yet, here we are, looking at this problem at this moment where there's a pandemic ripping through Black and brown communities, but destroying not only health, but livelihood and people coming back together. And where we are seeing that our nation's original sin of slavery is being made manifest in the suffering of our protesters. And so it's in this moment we have to ask again in a new way, what does it mean to love our students with our hearts ripped out of our bodies for them? And could that be enough? I've been fortunate with my children. They've been lucky, they've been healthy, but I do know that there are some parents who have know what it means to love with your heart ripped out when you're standing at the bedside of your child in the ICU, knowing that your kidney's not compatible, knowing that a ventilator is available. But what I do know is none of us would wish for that suffering, but what I do know is the parents who have endured that know that as terrible as the suffering is of looking at their child in that way, turning away from that child is worse. And so they are willing to look at that child, bear witness to their suffering, because to do anything else is impossible, because that child is their heart ripped out and separate from them. And so we need to continue to come back to say, who are we seeing? Which of our students do we see, and which of our needs do we see enough to love them with our hearts ripped out of our bodies for them, and to confront that we have not seen enough, we have not loved enough some of our students. And because of that, our disparities remain, not because of solutions are so far behind, but because, like the enslaved people left in Galveston, Texas, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, we have not yet fully seen our students, their purposes, and their roles. And what we see around us is the catastrophe of policing and protesting, of not seeing, of not treasuring, leaving 76% of our black students in Galveston, Texas, awaiting the emancipation of student success. Not because we have not loved them, we have not grieved the Tamir Rices who didn't come to us, and we have not looked deeply enough with love and courage at the ones who did survive and make it to our doors. And as terrifying as it is to look at suffering and not know what to do, I know that it is okay, because for 9 years I have woken up and begun my workday in a state of panic that I would not do. And I can tell you, the terror of not knowing whether you are enough to do what the world needs is not so bad. It is survivable, and it is a great joy. For me, the greatest joy of my life. And so we've already had the courage and love to look at needs that we couldn't face before. There was a time when we couldn't imagine a program for foster care youth because it was outside our mission, and now we have that. We could not have imagined a food pantry, and now we have that. We're beginning to see the technology needs and respond to that. We could not have imagined that in a few short weeks we could deliver our instruction beautifully online and remote, that we could make those changes so fast, and yet we did. So, and I don't want to sound like the work of student success started in 2011 with the retention initiative, because before that, for many years, for decades, there is the work of the hundreds of people. I have a list of the members of this campus who are already loving our students with their hearts worked out, serving them and supporting them. So, of course, not just seeing our students and bearing loving and courageous witness to their needs is not enough. It's just the starting point. And we know it's not enough because our disparities are still in front of us. And so, if you don't want the Groundhog Day of coming back, me coming back next year and saying, great news, we've made modest success and there's still a lot of work ahead, then there's something else besides bearing witness to our students and their needs and their brilliance that each and every one of us must do, not just those who are fortunate enough to be in a position of leadership, you, the board, President Wilson, Provost Whitfield, my colleagues in the Senate, my colleagues on the cabinet, the deans, those of you who are department chairs, the student success team, but every member of the university must do this if we don't want to come back next year and have this Groundhog Day. So while we are looking unflinchingly, courageously, lovingly into the face of the needs of our students, we have to simultaneously look into ourselves and our most cherished beliefs and confront the ways that those beliefs keep us from continuing to tend to the students in front of us. Beliefs such as that some students aren't met for college, that we've already done our share and it's someone else's problem, that culture can't change, that we can't afford it, that it's a problem of that guy we had a fight with 7 years ago, that somehow caring for our students will make us worse, not better, that we've always done it this way, that the holds have to work a certain way, that teaching has to work a certain way, that the budgets have to work a certain way, that the disciplines have to work a certain way, that research has to look a certain way, that meetings have to run some way, that our retirements have to be as that we always imagined them, that our athletics have to look a certain way, that our buildings have to look a certain way, that our board has to work a certain way, our schedule, technology.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I know. Thank you for your thoughts. I have a number of questions. I know we are.
I know, but I just really want to say that, and I know I have so much apologies for keeping you over, but these beliefs, those are not just our beliefs. Those cherished beliefs are our Confederate statues. Each of us have one that we are holding and treasuring so much that we will not set them down for the sake of our students. But we can do that when we look at that and admit that we will see that we can just set them down, or that we can reforge them, or that our colleague will come and take them from us, and that our work is not so much harder, that we can take Aunt Jemima off the syrup bottle. And when we do that, every one of us, that is when we will know that we are the university that can be the greatest of all time and the greatest of all history. Thank you.
And I was going to call on Governor Thompson, but what I want to say is that is all about, that it's all about responsibility. And part of the data that you put up today, this report, and we're at the point where we want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to ask questions about that data. So that's what this piece is for. Appreciate your sentiment, but also understand Governor Thompson and even Governor Bryan to see that we do want to get our questions answered. And so I think Governor Thompson, you had your hand up. I don't know if others did.
Yeah. Yes, and I do appreciate the sentiment, and I am somebody who has, from day one being on this board, been committed to making sure that all of our students, and in particular the Black students who there clearly have been disparities of retention and graduation, lack of resources provided to them, and making sure that we don't just understand what the issue is, but actually investing resources to make sure that we are graduating the students that agree to come to the university. So it's a matter of investment. It's a matter of clearly understanding what is it that we need to bring to these Black students. There should be a clear understanding. What is it that we need to give to our Black students in order to make sure that they are here, they're able to thrive, not just here, but thrive and graduate. So what exactly does that need to look like, and how can we, what money do we need to invest to make sure that happens? One more point I want to make is in 2013, we had 3,918 Black undergraduate students. Now we have 2,695 Black students. So we've had a massive decrease in the number of Black students, and we're still not doing a better job of graduating them. Why? One, why do we have this massive decrease? And why aren't we graduating them? Why aren't we giving them the support that they need? The answers, like you said, are not elusive. They are there. So what is it exactly that we need to do, and how much do we need to invest to make this happen? Nobody wants it more than me. I am a mother of a Black child, and these things are extremely important to me. So I'd like to hear responses to those questions.
Thank you. So, and we know many things that we can do and must do. We have programs that are not at scale, that have already proved effective. And I'm not here with a specific plan about a particular rate of scaling, but what I was trying to say is that it's beyond programs now. It's like what we see outside. It's not just the policing. It's not just the statues. It's the whole thing. And that's what I'm trying to say. It is the whole university that will have to take each person to hold their own actions and decisions up and daily look at the consequences for students. And so I will do my part. I will bring you a better, student success plan, but we will not be enough to do this with a program or an initiative until every person on the campus every day can say, how does my work, am I seeing the students in front of me, and how does the decisions going to make today affect our students? And I'm not trying to avoid responsibility, because we have programs that have worked and that we are learning from each other and that we will scale, and yet it is not the whole university shouldering that burden.
I agree. We need societal change and change at the university level. I am asking what you can do at your level, and I think this is a matter of leadership. Roy, I mean, it all comes from the top, and so I'm asking you, Roy, what is your particular plan to address this in 6 months? In 1 year?
So,
what are we investing?
So let me answer that. You raised 2 points. You mentioned the number of black students here in 2013. That was part of the legacy of the 40,000 era, where there was an effort to bring in any black student just to have more black students on campus. As a result of that, and without the support systems in place, that's why you had that very poor graduation rate. We were one of the worst in the country in 2011, 2012. And so the board, not Roy Wilson, the board made a decision at that time to make some changes in terms of that strategic direction of 40,000, bringing in as many students as possible, and make some changes in how admissions would be administered. That's number one. Number two, I don't know which data you're looking at, but the data that I think Monica presented, and that I think the whole country is agreeing with, is that there is tremendous progress being made. I don't know how much more you can go from 1% 4-year graduation rate to 13%. That's 1,300% higher. And then the 4-year graduation, 5-year graduation rate being where it is right now. So how much more does it have to be? How much steeper does that curve have to be for you to say we're making great progress? I don't know.
Until we're on par with our white students. I mean, 13% is not good enough. 18%, 25%, 23.5%, that's not good enough. And
you've never heard Monica.
Yeah, but we need specific, actionable plans. We need how much money do we need to invest to make this happen? We heard Monica say that we have 200 students who are being served by VIP, but we need about 700, or we need however many more to make sure that our students are graduating. What do we need to invest to make that happen? That's a specific question. That's specific. That can help to address the issue.
That is a specific question, and that's a specific answer we can provide you.
When? We need it now. This is urgent.
I also want to say that I clearly what you're saying. I got Black history, and so I understand the urgency, and I do believe urgency is the word that we need to use in terms of moving forward. The arrow is going in the right direction. But what Governor Thompson said, it needs to move more quickly, and I agree with that. I think the thing that said when Governor O'Brien talked about the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, that they are challenged with doing this work, and many major corporations have that, as you know very well, they have that office and that individual, and they say it's your responsibility. But it really is a responsibility for everybody to do that. And so, on the one hand, I look at that Department of Multicultural Affairs, or whatever the official name is, as a part of modeling what happens. So everybody has to have responsibility in that. People used to say to me when I was doing, what is New Detroit doing? I would say, what are all the organizations that are part of this? I don't know in terms of the plan. include everybody, not just the person that's responsible for putting the programs. The programs are really important, and scaling them up is important, absolutely. But from a values perspective, I do think the university says that's where our values are. But how do we live our values, and what does that look like? And so I think what I hear Governor Thompson, how do we speed this up? Okay, we're going in the right direction.
So Governor Staccato, with all due respect, okay, then the board needs to say what they believe is appropriate, because the whole country has said that what we're doing is a model, okay, and it's hard to get better than number one in the country, okay. So the board needs to say, okay, instead of being just number one, we need you to be number one by this margin or whatever. Then we can go.
Are we number one for our Black students? In graduation rates and retention?
We're among the very best in terms of the rate of improvement. Yes.
We're among the.
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes. We're whether we're number one or in the top 1% or whatever, it's very high.
Well, okay, how about in 1 year we get to 50% 6-year graduation rate for Black students? And
yeah,
so
that's not going to happen.
What do we need to do to invest? What do we need to do to invest to make that happen?
Well, first we need to let some Black students in. Let's start there.
I think what we need to do is, first of all, acknowledge where we are, and I think that's what we're doing. The next step is, what do we need to do to move forward? If we're going to have some statisticians look at, can you go from 24% to 50%? Is that possible? But look at what's possible. So I think that questions are part of the questions that we should be asking, and it's part of take these questions and then go back to the departments and then come back to the board, because it is our responsibility. One of the questions I heard you asking, Governor Thompson, how many dollars do we put into that? Those are questions that as a board we get to help make that decision when we approve the budget. So all I'm saying is that these are questions, and I don't think these questions can be answered here at this committee. We need to go back and make decisions and pull people together to make the decisions, because it is really, there are multiple decisions, dollars and cents, what are the programs, etc. And the other piece is that everybody is responsible. Everybody in the university, including the professors, folks in the admission office, everybody has some accountability to close the gap in African American students and Latino students, really, and others.
I agree in that, and it really does come down to, at the top, leadership saying these are things that are vital to happen, and people take their direction from the people at the top.
Which is why, Governor Thompson, we were number one in the country in the graduate rate of improvement.
Governor O'Brien, you had a question? You're mute. Your mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So a couple things. Every year we get the same report, and typically it's not good news, and we have modest success, and coupled with a dose of mea culpa, and but no plan, right? So we can't say that our enrollment has increased when in 2009-2010 school year, our total enrollment was 31,786, and then last year it was 26,844. Okay. On top of that, these are from our fact books. I don't make this stuff up. The other is that our Black enrollment back in the day, same year, 8,420 Black students total, undergrad, all throughout the campus, not just undergrad. And this past year was 3,923. Okay, we have more than half a reduction in our Black students in 10 years. So I wanted to also point out that Roy, Dr. Wilson had mentioned that in 2012, 2013, I think maybe Dana had mentioned that those numbers that year, that we had 4,489 Black students admitted for undergrad. But that same year, we had 485 black students graduate compared to last year, 473. Less graduated last year than graduated in 2012, 2013. Those are our fact books. So I don't know how you're trying to put lipstick on a pig here, but we need to figure this out and figure out why our black enrollment continues to go down every year for the last 11 years, right? 11 years. And why our, so we have this modest increase, even though, the APLU says we're number one and, because we tripled the black graduation rate. But as I mentioned in our last meeting, Roy, if you tripled 1%, that's still just 3. It stinks. So we tripled 7% to 21, which is 21 better than 7? Of course it is. Is it still bad? Yeah, it is. And the fact that we're getting a national award for graduating 21% black students doesn't tell me how good we're doing. It tells me how horrible higher ed is as a whole. If you're number one, this is the point that I want to make. So additionally, back to the, Shirley, I wanted to go back to something that was in the first section of Ms. Brockmeyer's presentation. And it really was about, I think Dana had mentioned the athletic division and some successes that the athletic division has with graduation rates and such, or replicating some other things like the Center for Latino Studies. There are workable solutions that are right here on campus. Right? We don't got to pay a lot of money for a consultant to figure this out. We just need somebody with the nerve to replicate what somebody else has already made successful. For example, I'll give you an example. We can, the Center for Latino Studies has an admissions waiver. I don't know if everybody knows that, but the Center for Latino Studies has an admissions waiver in their program. That means that if there is a student that they want to accept but might not meet the criteria for admissions to the school, that they can waive that student in with the knowledge that they're going to support that student and give that student support, right? So they look at other, holistic things that happen to students. Did their parent die the last year in high school and that's why their grades were horrible? Was there an issue in the family? Those kind of things, right? They waive those students in. You could similarly do the same thing in the African American Studies program and build that program up and do something else in order for it to become a strong and stronger learning community to support the students and the possibility of allowing more students to come in. DPS is not yet producing the volume of students that probably could be admitted, on par with everybody else. But I think they're making some strides. But the students that are there, that are graduating now, need our help. And everybody is aware that the fastest in the blackest big city in America with a high poverty rate, the fastest, quickest way out of poverty is the college education. If we're the institution of access and opportunity, we are failing our black students by not giving them an opportunity to come here. So, God forbid I, try to put a plan forward and have somebody slap my hand and say I'm interfering with the day-to-day running of the university. But I'm putting that out there so that somebody can run with it and replicate what's already working here. Stop looking for gold in somebody else's backyard when we have what we need here. And then I think Dana's correct. I will also reiterate, Roy, it starts with the commitment for all this starts at the top. And the commitment to get more, to educate more of our own kids in this city. Because in this town, race matters every day. Not just on
It matters in America.
Yeah, but in this town, race matters every day, not just on Juneteenth. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I've got no comment, so
Okay, so
I'm
I
going to
think we can move to the next part. We have to move to the next part. Unless there are any more questions, I think staff was able to hear that concern about the gap, graduation gap, and I would also say that, clearly we are going in the right direction. We got to improve in all African Americans, but also in terms of Latino numbers, that's 39%. So we need to improve there. We need to improve across the board. 53%, and we are improving and moving in the right direction. I think the next agenda item, Lou Lesson is going to talk about the new code of conduct. Any more questions? Lou?
Well, I do have a comment on the last issue. I think, we can agree to meet in the middle here. I think it's important to celebrate the progress that has been made, but I don't think it's suitable to rest on our laurels.
Right.
And I think there's 100% agreement across the board there. But, just something about this that doesn't sit well with me. And, I wasn't here, but it would make me feel a lot better if there was the same level of energy and concern for the success of black students when Alan Gilmore was president. I want to be able to look at the meeting minutes, and I want to see when Alan Gilmore was taken to the carpet about how black students were performing. In the midst of success that we're experiencing, I feel like it's very appropriate for us to celebrate that. But just the optics of us taking a black president to task over some recent success about black students, it just seems very odd. Now, granted, 13%, is not suitable. We need to continue to strive for more, obviously. But come on. We can celebrate that success, and let's provide some encouragement so that we can see more of it instead of this criticism.
So it's 24%. The 6-year graduation rate is what most people use across the board, most universities, and that is 24%. We have one last. Governor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say to my colleague, Mr. Barnhill, that it is your job and our job to hold this president, regardless of his color, to account. That's our job. That's what we're here to do. We do this true public service job for free, and we take it seriously to benefit our students, to benefit the university, and this city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh yeah. I absolutely understand that. But we're also in a period where we're laser focused on equality, right? We're talking about disparity. And I feel like that has to apply across the board. So in that vein, I want to see the minute, I want to see the meeting where Alan Gilmore was treated with the same level of disdain for what was a less successful experience for black students under his tenure. I was just talking about
Madam Chair,
our leadership.
Okay.
Voted on, we need to move on, and we have this discussion at a later point. We talk to each other. I think we got the point. We need to move on. Lou, are you there, Lou Lesson?
You're on mute, Lou. You're on mute, Lou.
Okay, am I off?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good morning.
We're running time, so I know you can go through this pretty quickly.
I will go through this very quickly if I can. We're here to talk about 2 changes in the Student Code of Conduct. They're unrelated to one another, so I will take them separately. I do not know whether people have the Student Code of Conduct before them or not, so I will generally refer to them, and if necessary, I can read them, but I'll start by not reading them. The first one that I would like to talk about is section 4.20, which deals with COVID. It deals with our reopening, and specifically deals with the requirement that students engage in social distancing. Provost Whitfield, and I think correctly, believes that most of this will happen through social norming, I believe is the term he uses. But there is a need for what happens when a hopefully small number of students take the view that they're not going to cooperate, they're not going to be available, they're not going to mask, etc. And 4.20 lays out in the Student Code of Conduct a series of requirements that students are supposed to engage in. Actually, everybody is supposed to engage in, or will be expected to engage in, but this is student-specific. And they deal with things like completing the campus daily screener questionnaire to come to campus, or following the campus health center instructions, or wearing a mask or facial covering, or the like. In public areas are defined in a separate section of the Code of Conduct at 2.19, and this simply gives the ability for the university, in those hopefully very few cases where it is necessary, to act to enforce as a violation of the Student Code of Conduct the refusal to engage in these kind of practices. As I've told the Dean of Students, it is my great hope that in a year he can come back and repeal this section. But we are where we are, and we need to be realistic about it. And that is the purpose of this section of the amendment. This section of the amendment is fairly broad. It covers most areas on campus other than a student's own resident. It allows for the notion that somebody might have to take off a mask while dining, and so forth. But that is the purpose of the first amendment that we are proposing to the Student Code of Conduct. Madam Chair, would you prefer that I stop here and take questions, or go through both of them?
Stop here and take questions because they're very good.
So, as to this amendment, are there questions that anyone would like to ask me?
Governor Kelly has her hand raised.
Help me I don't have complete knowledge of the existing code, but what will be the consequences of a student who willfully refuses, for example, to wear a face mask?
All right. Well, the Code of Conduct provides a series of administrative sanctions, potentially, that can be engaged in, and a process by which they are to be engaged in. And they deal with, essentially, very nearly all forms of non-academic misconduct. The process is either an informal or a formal process before the Dean of Students. Typically, it is resolved at that level. There is in extreme cases, a process for hearing, and theoretically at least, the process for suspension or expulsion. In this case, I very much doubt that would be necessary. But that is a possibility. It could be done, just as it can be done for other kinds of...
What interim measures will be taken short of this formal process?
If somebody refuses to engage in this?
Correct.
Okay, so somebody would probably have to refuse to engage in it more than once or twice, I would expect. But if somebody said, I'm not going to wear a mask, I don't care, I am young and invulnerable, and I don't care what impact it has on other individuals, then at some point that individual would receive a letter or communication from the Dean of Students inviting the individual to come and see him, and advising him that a charge was being filed under this provision of the Code of Conduct, and he had to come and see him within a certain date in order to discuss that. And then the process is the same process as exists elsewhere. There is a possibility under the Student Code of Conduct for an interim suspension. I would regard that as hopefully something we would never have to do, but it would be appropriate. That's not something I've added. It deals with health and safety, urgent health and safety issues. And that's been there all along. And that provision essentially provides the ability to suspend somebody for 10 days or until they come and see the Dean of Students. So in theory, we could do that.
Speaking of young things, if student A complains to student Does
Governor Kelly, I'm having trouble understanding. I'm sorry.
if student A complains that student B comes to class and refuses to wear a mask, does student A complain? Where does student A complain? Lodge his or her complaint?
Student A likely will complain to the professor, most realistically.
Right.
And student A in theory should complain to the dean of students, but realistically the student will complain to his or her authority figure, which is the professor. And the professor is at least as likely to be concerned about this as the student, because the professor is much more likely to be of a vulnerable age. And they would then take that forward.
Then the student would get a warning letter. Is that the step that would be taken?
There's no provision specifically that provides for a warning letter or not a warning letter in the Student Code of Conduct. It tends to be very case specific. But I would imagine in most cases, I would imagine what would happen in most cases would be that the professor would say, put on your mask, or remember to stay further apart, or something of that sort. If that failed, then then the student would get more likely a warning email, I would think. The process, this specific provision has been discussed and reviewed with the Dean of Nursing, who heads our Public Health Committee on Reopening, as well as, I believe, Keith took this, Provost took this to the Academic Senate Policy Committee, and the Dean of Students has discussed it with the Student Senate, as have, and I discussed it with these two representatives of the Student Senate who are present on this committee just yesterday. Generally, this seems to be well received. Faculty believe it is very important. Students seem to be, as best I can, if I can speak for them, desire that there be rules, that it be clear what's okay and what's not okay, so that they know how to model their behavior accordingly. Dean Clabo believes this is very urgently important to have to come back.
Myself, I was very impressed with the rest of their own. So I want to congratulate whoever's responsible for that.
Okay. So, are there other questions? We can vote on these individually or together.
That is your pleasure.
I have a question.
Okay, Mike.
It says in here, the board authorized administration to implement interim guidelines for a period of 6 months. Were the interim guidelines included in the materials? Because I don't remember.
We haven't come to that one yet.
That's the next.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we can hold that off for a moment.
And Governor Stancato, generally you would adopt the statute as a whole versus specific changes.
Okay, so now we go to the next.
Okay. All right. The second one is a very different topic, and that has to do with sexual misconduct. Some of you will recall that on the May agenda, I believe that Governor O'Brien noticed that we had a provision to deal with a revision to our sexual misconduct policy. We learned shortly before the meeting that the final rules were to come out from the Department of Education. And they indeed came out the next week on May 9th. They are very different in radically different ways from our existing policy, from the proposed revision that we would have brought to the board on May 1st. And for that matter, in many ways from the proposed regulations. For those of you who may not be aware, the Department of Education has been working on a final rule with its interpretation of the Title IX for more than a year. These have very substantial changes, and they were issued, as I said, just barely 6 weeks ago. they have a hard compliance date by August 14th. That means in the view of the Deputy General Counsel for the Department of Education that they must be implemented by that date. All right. At a university, even if we are not dealing with the issue of coronavirus, if we are not dealing with restarting, and if we are not dealing with financial circumstances that are beyond everyone's control, during the summer, the key stakeholders are not available for discussion. The key stakeholders, by and large, consist of students and the faculty, and largely is represented by the Academic Senate. The Academic Senate had appointed, in the drafting of the earlier regs, the ones we were too reg, Brad Roth as its representative, and I've talked with Brad about this proposal several times. It seems to me it is simply not possible to expect, frankly, either Wayne or any other university really to engage in appropriate consultation with the stakeholders who are most affected. Nor is it possible in this time to give the board the information it would need to understand the differences that we're voting on. And so that is not an attractive or desirable option, although that may be an option. The other choice is to not adopt anything. If we chose to do that, we would have two major failings. First of all, we would not be able to prosecute any case under Title IX, because any case would be able to defend it. Any respondent could defend himself or herself by simply saying you're not following the law, and they would be right. And secondly, we would not be able to enter into institutional guarantees, assurances, which we are required to do for purposes such as receiving grants, or for that matter, receiving Title IV funding, student scholarships, federal scholarships, and loans. It is not normally known, but whenever we file one, there is a page that says you are in compliance with this and this and this, and we would not be able to say that. So what to do when there is a radical change in the law with an abrupt date, inadequate time to discuss that or draft a policy with the most affected individuals, let alone to implement it, and yet the need to implement it. To add to that, there are now, I believe, 3 lawsuits pending which could delay the deadline, and depending on what happens with them. We don't know that, but all 3 of them, including one by the Attorney General of Michigan and 15 other states, all three of them ask for injunctive relief, which could delay the effective date past August 14th. What we settled on as an appropriate approach would be to ask for interim authority for a 6-month period from the effective date, whether that's August 14th or October 1st, depending on litigation, as to which we have no way to know the outcome. 6 months that would be adopted, during which we would be in compliance with the regs if they are active, the final rule rather, and after which we would bring a policy to the board. In that period, we would have the opportunity to re-engage in a more robust discussion of what the policy should look like, and be informed in the doing of that by what has happened with litigation, if litigation has had any effect, and by what our colleagues at other universities have done and found workable or not. So that the notion would be, if the regs take effect August 14th, that by the middle of February, or presumably the next meeting after that, I don't have the schedule, we would come to the board with a policy that the board we would ask to consider. The board, and that is the answer to Governor Pasquito's question. No, I do not have the interim guidelines before you, and they have not yet been drafted. There is a small committee consisting of the Dean of Students Office, the Office of Equal Opportunity, the Title IX Director, a couple of individuals from my office, headed by Nikki Wright. And that committee is now in the process of drafting interim guidelines. The policy itself, the final rule, is 26 pages long with 2,030 pages of commentary. So it is not a small task to draft this. And time pressing, I will not go into some of the many ways in which it is different, although perhaps we can discuss that at a later point, but it is radically different in very substantial ways than our current policies. So,
Michael, did that answer, Michael? Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. I guess my follow-up though is then, are we going to be asked to vote on a policy that we don't get to see?
We are asking you for the authority to implement a policy for 6 months, if it is necessary to do that. And then you will be asked to vote on a policy at the board level that you hopefully will have had opportunity to review carefully, ask questions about, to press whatever questions you wish to press at that point. This is asking for authority, for interim authority, for such a policy that will be published by the administration in the Administrative Policies and Procedures Manual, probably between, August and February.
So you're asking us to vote in advance on a policy that will be proposed by the federal government?
No, the federal government has already put out prescriptive final rules.
Okay.
And they are out and they are subject to challenge, but they are presumably going to be valid on August 14th. So we must act on the assumption that they will be in effect. There is, it is simply an impossible thing to ask that the faculty have the opportunity to review this in detail. And we have discussed this with Brad, or that students be involved at the kind of level that they should, or that, frankly, the careful thought that should go into it. So the policy that we will put together, the interim guidelines that the board approves, will be something that tracks fairly closely the final rule, which will not be something most of the board, I think, will be terribly pleased with, for a variety of reasons. And at this point, I should add 2 points. First of all, I want to thank 2 members of the Academic Senate, one of whom called the fact that we had left out a piece of the draft, which is why you got the second draft. And secondly, I want to specifically thank Brad, because Brad caught an ambiguity as to when it would take effect that we had not realized was there, and we revised. So the policy, assuming it took effect, would be as to Title IX complaints that were filed on or after the effective date, August 14th. We assume. So.
I see Nida was
Nada.
Nada. Okay, Nada.
Okay. Lou, when you said your committee is going to help write the interim guidelines, I noticed that there is no Senate representative on it.
Well, yes and no. I did ask Brad.
Okay.
Brad asked that we please just keep him informed as to the progress of the committee. So, and I do propose to ask Brad to take part in the drafting of the more permanent policy. But there's no Senate representative on this one because the Senate representative doesn't have time over the summer. Basically, it's actually a microscopic but a significant manifestation of the very problem I was talking about.
No, I understand that. But Brad did ask that he be informed?
Yes, and has been so far, to my knowledge. I've attended a couple of the meetings, but I'm not actually myself on the committee drafting those. So I know that they're working on this and that. It's an enormously complicated set of things, but Brad did ask, and of course we will honor that request.
Thank you.
Massive amount of time, short time.
Maryland, I saw Maryland's hand. I'm trying to go in the order of this, but hands that I see from Maryland.
Yeah, thank you. So if I understand correctly, then you plan to have, your proposal is to have, if we pass this, an interim guidelines in effect by August 31st. Is that correct?
August 14th, depending on the effective date of the final rule. Currently, that is August 14th. If that will put off because of litigation, then...
Right. Yeah, and that was my other comment, that this is extraordinary, to be sure, but we have so many uncertainties about what we should have in our code as a consequence of these varying factors, that I think that Lou is making a very practical and sensible recommendation to us. It could well be that these guidelines will never be implemented if, for example, any of the litigations that are in effect, are in place right now, should be successful. So we are living in extraordinary uncertainty, and for that reason, I think his proposals are good.
And then we have Dana, Brand, and then Sam. So Dana, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just wondering, can you just give us an understanding of what these new rules are?
The final rule?
Yeah.
I propose to go into more detail than I will be able to here during executive session. I would tell you that one of the things that would be different would be almost none of the cases we have brought to the board in executive session would be doable as Title IX cases under the final rule. And that will explain why. For that, I would prefer to put that off to executive session because of the nature of the cases.
Okay. But generally, it's weakening them or something? It's making it...
The final rule very substantially weakens them. It narrows the definition, in my view, of what is a Title IX complaint. It requires significant procedural obstacles, perhaps, to the filing of a complaint and to the maintaining of a complaint. It requires that certain kind of cases be dismissed. As an attorney, you will particularly appreciate one requirement that I find extraordinary, which is that after any question is asked in a hearing, the hearing officer, and all hearings have to have hearing officers, the hearing officer must individually rule on that question's relevance before it can be answered. So a 2-hour hearing now became a 2-day hearing. It has any number of things of that sort that requires some significant challenge. It has overlap into Title VII to the point that even the Department of Education recognizes we may not know until a complaint is underway whether it's a Title IX complaint or a Title VII complaint. And there are different rules. You may be aware, I don't know, Dana, how much you've personally been involved. The standard for a Title IX complaint used to be substantial or pervasive. It now requires that they be substantial and pervasive. So defining it. There are many, many differences, very few of which are in favor of the position we have historically taken with regard to the importance of these areas.
Okay. And you'd like us to say, okay, we know that these rules are being drafted and it's the language for the code of conduct is being drafted. We just are approving the fact that we're going to incorporate these provisions into our code of conduct, but we don't know the substance of them.
No, not quite. I'm asking that you give authority to the administration to adopt interim guidelines that will be published in the Administrative Policies and Procedures Manual. And they would be effective for 6 months, assuming that this policy does take effect, after which a final policy would have to come back to the board.
Right. So we won't have a chance to know what those interim guidelines are because they're being drafted now.
Right. I'm not asking that the board draft on the specific, or rather speak to the specifics of the interim guidelines that we're discussing. I'm asking that the board allow the administration 6 months to impose such guidelines over a period of 6 months, or until period of 6 months if they are effective, up to 6 months. In the meantime, our current policy would remain in effect.
Okay. Thank you.
I think Brad and then Senator Brad, you have a question?
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a misunderstanding between Lou and myself about my role with respect to this, because it's true that I declined to play a specific role that Lou and Nikki had proposed for me in this process, but I did indeed volunteer on behalf of the Senate Policy Committee to be a part of this process of the interim guidelines crafting. And thus far, I haven't really been looped into that, although I've been in touch with Lou and Nikki otherwise. And so I would, because of the importance of the Senate remaining informed of how this is going forward and being able to have input into the interim guidelines, I really do think it's important to recognize there being the specific Senate representation within that committee, regardless of how active a role specifically I play within it.
I apologize for that. I don't have any problem with that. As much as Brad was very helpful in the drafting of the policy that unfortunately we could not bring forward on behalf of the Senate, and I have no problem with Brad's continued involvement to whatever extent he is able to make time.
Well,
I do plan on leaning on him heavier in the major drafting. But this is an abrupt thing that came out over the summer. It is difficult for people who have already set out their research agendas and whatnot to make the time for it. I understand that. So to the extent he has time, he's more than welcome. And,
that's what we appreciate the work you've done on that.
I'm sorry?
I just congratulate Brad for the work that he's done up to now and appreciate his willingness to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra?
I have nothing further. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Other questions? So we have before us changes in the code of conduct, one having to do with the pandemic and behavior on campus, and the other having to do with putting together an interim 6-month code under the code of conduct for Title IX, understanding that the federal policy goes into effect August 14th, and because of the summer, we can't include everybody that we need to include to get the policy to the point we want to get it to. Is that, Lou, is that?
That's correct.
Questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lou, I just wanted to mention, when the new rules are promulgated, so you're going to have these interim rules to be in effect from the effective date, which is August 14 right now, till presumably February 14, and then within that 6-month period of time, you and the group will be working on our final, absent litigation and something else changing. You're going to come up with our final rules that you'll present to the board for adoption. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do we have a motion on the floor? It's not on the floor.
We need one.
To adopt the revised code of student conduct.
I'm sorry, who was the supporter? I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure I got the.
I didn't hear any support.
I thought I heard someone say support, and if not, you
I'll
can just.
support it if you need that. Daphne will support if you need one.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, opposed?
Okay.
Thank you. Now, the agenda is complete, so now I guess President Wilson, I'll turn it back over to
Yeah,
you.
thank you. So since we're complete with the two committees for this morning, we'll be in recess until the public session will reconvene at 3 o'clock. And let's see, it is now almost 12:30. So why don't we say 1 o'clock for